Marcy, I'm so excited to talk to you and hear more about all the amazing things that you do.
And I'm coming to you from like 0 degrees outside and you have sun.
I know. You're in St. Louis.
I am. Yeah, it's been in the negatives the past couple days.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, here in North Carolina, the weather is more moderate, which is one of the reasons why I love it. Now, you have been on the Second Mother site for a while as one of our featured authors, but you keep producing more and more amazing content. So I definitely wanted to do this interview with you and also promo your second book, or your fourth book, your second book that I have here on my desk. So you are the author of both of these books that are amazing. I read this one when it came out, The Forgotten Adoption Option.
And I think that was our first like Zoom. It was like
Yes,
pandemic era time. Yeah.
yes, exactly. Such an amazing voice you are for adopting from foster care. And then you recently released this, which is more instructions and then also testimonials from how many families about how they managed to
Yeah.
navigate the foster care
There's
system.
over 50 stories. They're really raw. I had someone ask, so like if I'm listening to the audiobook version of this around my children, what do you think I should not listen to? And I was like, this book is written to an adult. They're honest
Yeah,
stories. Your kids can
yeah,
listen, but there's some real stories in there. But they're all
yes.
anonymous. So they're all people I know that have adopted through foster care. And I'm even in there, my husband's in there. We've just anonymously shared our stories to help mentor other families who are thinking about adoption through foster care.
Okay, and then also let me read the rest of your bio. So you are a mother of two children who were adopted from foster care. In addition to being the author of four books, you host a monthly podcast and also many other speaking engagements. We share a wonderful honor, which is being honored as an angel in adoption in Washington, D.C. by the Congressional Coalition on Adoption Institute. You were also the USOA Mrs. Ohio for 2022. Beautiful you. And you also founded a reading program for children to create awareness about foster care. And then finally, most recently, Marcy, you were on the Kelly Clarkson show. And I was so excited and proud of you that day. And I watched it and I was just weeping with you that you won that award and are able to just do more to get more children adopted from foster care. So I thank
Quite,
God
yeah.
for you. I
Oh, well,
really
thank
do.
you. Yeah,
You are an overachiever. And I've just got to say, a lot of second mothers are. I mean, we are doing all the things, which doesn't surprise me because that's why I love this community, because that's the kind of women we are. We're like, sure, I'll adopt the kids. Sure, I'll foster a few more. Sure, I'll take care of the other foster families in my community. Sure, I'll go advocate. Sure, I'll do this. I think I'll write a book. Well, maybe I'll go to seminary. I mean, we are doing
we're
all the things.
passionate.
I
Yeah.
love it though. I love it. And I want to talk to you about your passion. And I want to ask you some very specific questions because folks watching this, they probably think they know about foster care. Most will know some, but let me just set up a few um, basic facts here, and then you can share more. Children in the United States foster care system, the goal of the U.S. foster care system is to reunite children with their biological parents, and that's a good goal. However, correct me on this statistic, half of the children who come into foster care cannot be reunited with their parents. Is that correct?
Yeah, 50% of the time, kids that enter foster care do not reunify. So
Yes.
they might have to come in multiple times, but 50% of the time, they do not go back to their biological
So
parents.
they need another family and they need to be adopted. And this is
True.
where your passion lies. Now, I think I heard you say once, or maybe I read it in one of your books, that it took you years to figure out how to adopt through foster care, since that's not the overarching goal of the foster care system. What was your aha moment when you figured it out?
Orphan Sunday, my church
Ah,
had this expo. It was a big church. They had tables and people from different agencies in. And when you walked in, they handed you this little brochure that had like a quick blurb on every agency. And so during the service, what do? You read through it right while the pastor's preaching. And what caught my eye was a ministry that said that they teach Christian families how to foster and adopt children through foster care. And I was like, what? Like, I didn't know you could do that. And meanwhile, my husband and I, so I often get asked, like, oh, was this like your plan A? Was this like an infertility thing? Because there's so many different reasons why people pursue adoption. We really wanted to adopt. We had actually done a lot of research. I mean, the internet was such a different animal when we first got married 16 years ago, because we started looking, and I remember this like pamphlet I had that had like infant adoption, international, and it went through all the costs and all these things. And I was like, I don't want to do that.
So I'm sure people are wondering, how did you figure out how to do it? And of course, the short answer is get these books and read them, because she takes you through step by step. But another one of the aha things that I want you to explain is the financial affordability for adopting from foster care, because many, many, many people write to me, talk to me,
I have
contact
a heart to
me.
adopt, but I
Yes,
don't have the finances, right? You get that a lot
correct,
too. Yeah.
correct.
And
Every
it's
time. And
challenging. Yeah. Because
yes,
I think that's an assumption. There's this myth that in our country, if you're going to adopt internationally or domestically,
right.
you're going to have to drop 20 plus, 30 plus $1,000, which
Yes,
is true for infant and international adoption. But when it comes
yes.
way to foster care adoption, the out of pocket expenses is $0 to $2,500 per child, which is
Wow.
very moderate. And then I always like to tell people too, like the state covers health insurance until the child is 18. And you can get, like, there's a certain network for this, but preschool, like daycare, summer camps, they're free. So this really is not a financial question to adopt kids through foster care. It's really a heart question. And then it also, we'll kind of get to this too, it's really an advocacy question, because you have to go advocate for these kids. No one
Yeah.
else is going to do it for you. And the system in and of itself is actually going to make it really complicated for you and try to guide you to
Yes.
foster instead of adopt.
Exactly. And that's the next thing I want to ask you about. But before I do, I just want to add one thing that our family was also able to take advantage of is the Pell Grant for children who are adopted over the age of 14. And we were able to access that twice. And that made a huge difference at that time in our lives, because we had numerous kids in college. And that's just another thing available to kids who've been in foster care. So speaking of what you just said about the system making it, trying to lead you towards foster care, not adoption, I have experienced a bias towards wanting families who come to an interest meeting. They're very much directed towards foster care. And if you say, I want to adopt, it's almost like that's a problem, because that's not what the system is set up for. Have you experienced that bias? And what advice do you have for parents who come up against that?
Yeah, the reality, I think, nationally is there's a shortage of foster parents. So if we look at
Right.
it from a business perspective or just like a supply demand perspective, we
Right.
have more kids that need to be in a foster home than we have foster parents. So from the agency perspective, I get why you want us to become foster parents. Okay, we can acknowledge that. The challenge is, I think we often, like when we're going on a road trip, right? If you, I don't know if you like McDonald's or if you're a vegan, but like, if you go to the McDonald's by you or by me, they're going to have French fries. And we all expect to go through the drive-through, get our Happy Meal. Like it's consistent, right? And the challenge in the foster care adoption space is you have to throw the entire concept of consistency out the window. Because if you call the agency that's 10 minutes from you, 5 minutes from you, and 20 minutes from you, you're not going to get the same answer.
Right.
And your state and my state are not going to give the same answer. And
Right.
so what I do is I coach families. I deliberately make margin in my schedule to talk and coach families across the country through this process. And every state, every county, every agency is a little bit different. But what
Right.
I tell them, because I've had many that sign up and they say, I want to adopt. And they're like, oh, let's get you in classes. And then midway through the classes, and this happened to me, I got licensed. I was all the way through the first set of classes, which gets you the ability to work with the foster care system, like foster children. We did not sign the papers because we did not want to foster. And we got a call for a 4 and 14-year-old. And my heart got pulled, Jody. My husband's a teacher. I couldn't talk to him right away because he's teaching. So we talked later on. And I was like, oh, there's these girls and I'm all like emotional about it. And he was
Right.
like, hello, what was our goal? And I was like, to adopt children. Yeah. these kids are going into foster care. Will we adopt them? What? I don't know. Maybe Marcy, this is not for us. And what happens then, this happens often with the families I work with, they get the same
Yes,
call. They get the
of
same call. You
course.
said adopt, and you have to be, you have to kind of be cold and say no. Like it kind of hurts because you as a human being feel awful. Like you feel
Right.
awful to say, no, I'm not going to help those kids. Well, that's
Oh,
because that wasn't your intention. So you see how it's really easy to get
of
corralled the other
course,
way. But then there's
of course.
also, to your point, I have other families, I've had many this has happened to, where they called the agency, they didn't get a call back at all, and or someone lost their paperwork, or they were told, oh, we don't license to adopt. We can license you to foster. And it's basically either there's one way or no way and a closed door. And with
That
those
was my
families,
experience years ago
mhm,
before my first domestic
yes.
adoption, or maybe right after. I wanted to adopt an older child from foster care, and when I told the agency I was just there to adopt, they stopped talking to me. That's
Right,
exactly what
right,
happened.
right. And so this is back to that McDonald's analogy. Sometimes when that happens, you have to find the other agency, and finding another agency isn't always handy. So that's when, like, I'm working with a network of people around the country, and we find you that agency because that agency, they're all doing marketing in silos, okay? And then that means like their website, their classes, like they're not actually, there isn't like, here's the flyer and the billboard for the whole country to know that the second Tuesday of every month we do this thing. Like that's not how this works. And so fortunately, you have to go figure out what agency will let you down that path. And you have to be a broken record reminding the agency
Mhm.
what your intention is, because they're going to ask you, even though they say, oh, got it, they're still going to offer you the ability to foster. And in my
Got
scenario,
it.
my heart was to adopt. I wanted to have kids permanently who I knew, like we mentioned before, 30% of the children currently in foster care, they're currently in foster homes, residential homes, they are adoptable. And I wanted to adopt those kids. And so the challenge is you have to figure out how to do that. And that becomes a lot of onus on you as the parent, not the system at all.
Marcy, so why, perhaps this is an unanswerable question, but let me ask it anyway. If 30% of the kids who are currently in care are adoptable, why is it so hard to match you with those kids? Is it because that's not where the pressure is on the worker? Because that child is in a family somewhere, and what the worker's dealing with is the kids there in their office or just got put on their desk who need an immediate home. Is that the issue, that the
That's
adoptable
one
children are
factor.
somewhere stable?
Yeah, that's one factor. But there's many. So like another key factor would be, so Jody, let's say you and I live in the same state but different counties. You're licensed, and maybe I'm the foster parent in the story. Okay. I have this kid or sibling group with me, and I just don't feel like adopting them. Maybe I just feel called to foster. So like I'm not going to adopt, I already whatever. Okay. And you're like, I want to adopt them. Well, unfortunately, since you and I were licensed by separate agencies, they might not play well together. So it actually might not be an incentive for them to take the kids out of my home and into yours, even though that gives the kids permanency. So that happens. It happens a lot cross state. So it gets really complicated when, across the country, there's 113,000 children that are just waiting to be adopted. 113,000
Okay.
children. And what gets complicated, and this one is like unanswerable in my mind, while there are more people like me saying, yes, I'll do this, because the states are kind of territorial about the kids in my state need to live with families in my state, we're
Right.
making it way more complicated. So that's a factor. But to your earlier point, when an agency only has so many social workers, licensing workers, and the funding is set up a certain way that they need to focus on this or that, and there's a kid that just got removed from their family because of neglect, abuse, all these things, right? That kid gets precedence, right? And there's such a
Right.
shortage and a turnover of social workers right now, too.
Right.
And so, Jody, this kid came in right now. I've got to find this kid a place to sleep tonight, and my coworker's out sick today. I have to focus on that when we've got the 100 kids in our state or whatever the number is. My state's about 1,500 that are just stuck in a foster home. And it's like, oh, that's okay. They have somewhere to sleep tonight. But it's like, but they need
Right.
permanency, and their childhood is only so long.
This is what breaks my heart, Marcy,
Yeah.
because as you and I were discussing earlier, so many things in the system are set up around the rights, convenience, and incentive for the adults, all the adults involved. And I'm glad you used the word incentive, because I'm not sure people understand the way the US foster care system works is that states receive a certain amount of money from the federal government based on the number of children that are in care. So
Which is
it's
intended to take care of those kids. Like that's the intention. But
but what we actually are creating is an incentive to keep kids in care. It's just makes sense. If I have 20 kids, I get this amount of money. If I have 10 kids, I get this amount of money. Of course, whenever you put money behind keeping the number bigger, that's what you're going to end up with. That's how bureaucracy works. That's how our human nature works. And it's heartbreaking to me because when I started doing this work, the number we always used was that there was 100,000 waiting kids in foster care. And now we have to say 113,000. So even with all the advocacy we've done in the church, with all the things like Orphan Sunday, which I used to coordinate, and, if everything I did was just to let you be in that church that day, well, then I accept it, Lord. That was awesome.
I love that.
But it still makes me very sad that with all the work that's being done, the great work that's being done in the local church with so much advocacy, that number keeps
Well, but
ticking.
it's tricky though, right? Because the other side of that is every day more kids go into the system. Every
Right,
day more kids become adoptable, right?
right.
And on top of that, because I have people that are like, so how many families, Marcy? Like, how many kids have gotten adopted that you've worked with? And I'm like, here's the deal. Every day I'm planting a seed that's 2 years away. Because
Right.
every family that comes to me and says, I have this fear, or this is something on my mind, or can I just be like candid with you and ask this question? Because like I just don't know. And I love that because yes, please do. But the challenge is if you call the agency tomorrow, the you're gonna have to
Right.
wait. I think the data says 6 to 18 months. I'm seeing more a year and a half to 2 years for you to
Yes.
actually go to court to legalize the adoption. So
Oh,
in that
at
two
least,
years, yeah,
at
in that two
least.
years, there's more kids that come in, and
Yes.
then it's just, yeah, it to your point, it is a sad reality, Jody. My hope is that while that fight is a hard fight, it's daunting. It's daunting to feel like we're kind of stagnant. Like, are we really making a difference? But what I know is I am seeing a lot of families adopt sibling groups. And I love that. I love getting these text messages with photos they can't share publicly yet. And they let me in and they show me these faces of these kids.
One thing that I've seen in the system that adds confusion, is it true that in many states, when the plan for the child to be in foster care, there's one social worker, and then when the plan changes to adoption, even the social worker changes? Is that
It
correct?
can happen. Yeah. I mean, any model you've heard, Jody, is used somewhere. Are they all consistent? No, they
Right.
are not. So that can change the person, like and this happens very consistently with all families I coach. The worker that licenses them and then the worker that's with them when they either interview for an individual child or sibling group and or have them move in and then go to the court, that 2 year period, it's not very common as the same person. It's just not
Yes.
because there's
Oh,
just so much turnover. So yeah,
my
there's
two my two friends who most recently finalized adoptions from foster care, both their kids were in the system for 5 years before they finalized. And both these friends wanted to adopt as soon as the child came into their home. And there was back and forth, complications, change of plan. And this is two different states. 5 years, 5 years. And the children didn't have permanency that whole time. And so
but they fought it out, and
they
that's
fought it
amazing
out.
because to stay, because that happened to us. We were told, oh, you're the legal risk placement, we're going to call you the pre-adoptive home, should take about 4 months, which you should never list. Like, you should always add 6 to 12 months to any number you ever hear floated your way. And then it
It's
went
good
back and forth and
advice.
back and forth, and then they were like, oh, by the way, we think because you guys live 5 hours across state, and with the time we interviewed 10 families, we chose yours. But now that we've had a little more time, we're thinking that we should move the kids to another foster family, even though they had none in their own county, and they need to move. And my husband and I were like, no, we can make more cross-state visits per month. You just tell us when. Like, we will be the
Wow.
consistent thing in their lives. But to me, it was like, Jody, why was that a good idea? Like,
Yeah.
what? Like, the kids are doing fine. If proximity is the issue, then just get them there more frequently. You don't need to put them in a new environment. Like, that's just, to me, that seems so short-sighted.
Again, convenience of adults.
Sure.
Convenience of adults. This is what the stick that troubles me is that half of the foster families quit after a year. And again, as someone who used to be a businesswoman, those two 50% statistics stick with me. If I ran an organization that 50% of the time the goal we set out to do didn't work, would you consider it successful? Well, that's the foster care system. The entire system is set up to reunify kids, and 50% of the time that's not possible, but 50% of the assets are not going towards the other half of the kids that need to be adopted. They're not. It's all front loaded on the first 50%. The other 50% is that churches, I did this for a decade, are constantly recruiting people, foster, 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 and half quit after a year because of having to deal with the system and what they go through dealing with this. And it hurts my heart for the kids in the system. I know we share this heart, but do you have any words of advice or encouragement so that people don't quit, so that half the people don't quit after a year?
Yeah, well, I think the first part is know what you're trying to do, right? So if you want to adopt, please do not sign up to foster.
Yeah.
Don't. I know there's a term that gets used interchangeably, like foster to adopt, foster care adoption. They sound similar. They're not. Foster care
Okay.
adoption, 113,000 children are legally free and available for adoption. If that's what you want to do, please go adopt those children. If your heart is to adopt, don't say, I want to be a foster parent because just in case that kid needs a forever family, I want to be it. Because what's going to happen in your heart, and this is why I did not say yes to this, is because I could not advocate for reunification if my heart was to keep the kid. Like it's really, really hard. So I would say at the very beginning, if you're going into foster care and you're thinking, well, maybe you're like me before I knew that I only thought you could only go into foster care to foster, and you think, oh, but I heard people end up adopting sometimes. They do, but you could be more successful adopting if you just go after the kids. You go approach and pursue the children that are waiting to be adopted. You can find many of them at the Heart Gallery of America's website. So that's one piece of it. The other piece of it, because I also had a family that's currently in the tide of all of this, both very successful business people, have capacity like financially to do things. And they read my first book, The Forgotten Adoption Option. I know them, they're local to me. And they got started, lots of bumps happened. Social worker changed, paperwork lost, like they were all the way through the whole process and everything was gone somehow, super random and weird. And they were so frustrated. And they came to me and they're like, we're done. Like, we are so done because we could go do this private adoption thing. Their motivation was infertility. We want to have children. This is our way to do that. So we're going to I think I should go pay for it. Like, we can do it. We have the capacity. Let's do it. And I paused them and I said, why did you get into this? And they said, well, because there's kids that need us. And I said, right. And there's a system that's messy. And that kid did not design the system. We know those kids
Right.
not have the system because those kids would not let it be this way. We know that.
No.
And so it's like, if you can remember that's who you're fighting for, I think you need to reconsider if you can just stick it out. And if not, that's okay. But like, you have to realize, this kind of goes back to my earlier comment, like you have to advocate for the children. You do. Don't expect the system to. And this family is still writing it out. They have a little guy in their life that they're kind of writing out the timeline with. And it's beautiful and amazing, but they're biting their teeth going, we have to adjust and calibrate our heart because we realize we're frustrated because we live in a world, a business world where things are smooth. There's process. It's consistent. We deliver things, right? And if you bring that lens over into the foster care system, every single time you're going to be let down, every single time. And so that would be my best advice is, can you really check your heart? And some things you can do. One, you can realize and treat the social worker who has a huge caseload, who everyone around her is overworked and quitting, and him, right? If you can just, every time you have to follow up, while you might be irritated because they yet again haven't responded to your email, just greet them with empathy and say, hey, checking in, trying to get this. And they have so much on their plate. They're not really trying to snuff you. There's just too much demand.
Yes.
And not that you should micromanage them, but I think there's this beautiful collaborate piece where you can work with them and be really helpful. So like, for instance, my husband and I, when we signed up to take classes, we had a brand new social worker. And she gave us, this is what we're going to do in all those home study visits. And Jody, you know what we did? All those things they said we needed, we handed them to her when she arrived at our house. And
Wow.
she said, nobody does this, Marcy. My management came back to me and they were like, what just happened? And I was like, we know we want to do this and we want to make it as easy on you as possible. And if we can do
Wow.
that by giving you everything at once, I think we had owed some sort of like physical, you have to get like a healthcare physical. But all that said, like there's little things you can do, like
Right.
make copies of that stuff from your phone or, scan it before you hand it in. So you have that paper trail. There's just other ways that can keep you focused on the children and less frustrated by that process. Because I really feel like the frustration of that process is what's making people quit. They're
Yes,
tired of it.
you're absolutely right. And their hearts are in so many directions. Well, speaking of children, because I have such a heart for these kids and a grown-up system poorly designed that they are, trying to thrive in. Tell me about your children's book because I don't have a copy of it. I need to get a copy of it.
We should
And
fix
I
that.
want to start putting more children's books on the Second Mother site. So tell me about the book.
Okay. Very bright, very colorful, very,
Oh,
very, very
cute.
intentional because the kids that are in foster care deserve to be looked at with opportunity. So it's called Are You a
Yes.
Forever Family? It is a celebration of different types of families that adopt. And it's an information letting you know there are kids adoptable in foster care. So this actually has a lesson plan during the month of May, which is National Foster
Yes.
Care Month. It got
Right.
piloted last year. A couple Girl Scouts will be going national this year. There's a 30 to 45-minute lesson plan. You get to read the book. It's a great, you can tell if you have kids, tell the teachers. If you are a teacher, please use it. K through
Great.
5. And you get to use coloring sheets from the book. There's great discussion questions. My husband's a teacher, so I worked with a colleague at a school that's a kindergarten teacher as well, and then 2 local Girl Scouts. And I like to say the discussion is more of that lovely Mr. Rogers educational feel.
You're an amazing woman in this space. We could talk to you forever, but moms don't have time. So, I want to just remind people again, I'll put up links, Marcy, and any other links you want me to put up with this
Sure.
interview. Keep doing what
Appreciate
you're
that.
doing. So proud of you. Much love to
Appreciate all the
you, dear.
encouragement.